I don't give you permission to sell this house. Not now. Not when my daughter's body hasn't even gone cold. I said it sharp and steady, my voice slicing through the thick silence of Sarah's old kitchen. That was the moment everything became clear to me, the moment I understood that the problem I was facing wasn't just grief, it was danger. My name is Ethel Washington. I am 65 years old, and 3 days before that sentence left my mouth, I buried my only daughter, Sarah. She was 48, a successful dentist, a mother of 2 boys, a woman who worked herself to the bone so she would never have to depend on anyone, not even her husband. And yet there he was, her husband, my son-in-law, sitting in her kitchen, spreading papers across her dining table like he was closing a real estate deal instead of erasing a life. Malcolm Thornton didn't look at me when I spoke. He kept his eyes on the contract, tapping the edge of it with a pen. "Ethel, listen to me," he said, forcing a calm tone. "This is about stability, about doing what's best for the boys." I felt something tighten in my chest at the word boys. "You don't get to use my grandchildren as leverage," I said. "Not with me," he sighed, leaned back in the chair, and finally looked up. "You're emotional. Anyone would be. But Sarah is gone. The mortgage, the upkeep, the taxes. This place is a burden now. Selling it gives us liquidity." Liquidity. That's what he called my daughter's home. "She paid for this house," I said, "with her own money, and I helped her when she needed it. You will not rush me into anything." He tried again, switching tactics the way slick men do when they sense resistance. "Ethel, the market is insane right now. If we wait, we lose hundreds of thousands. Sarah would have wanted us to be smart." I laughed then, short and bitter. "Don't you dare tell me what my daughter would have wanted." His jaw tightened. "I'm thinking long-term," he said. "Eli's college. Jaden's future. We can't afford sentimentality." That was when I noticed Jaden standing in the doorway. My older grandson, 21, hands in his pockets, eyes flat. He didn't say a word, didn't defend me, didn't question his father. And suddenly, I wasn't just angry. I was scared. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "And neither is anyone else. Not today, not tomorrow." End quote. Malcolm stood up so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You don't have a say in this," he snapped. The mask slipped then, just enough for me to see what lived underneath. Sarah left everything to me. I stood my ground. "You married her. You didn't own her. That did it." "You think you're in control here?" he shouted. His voice filled the kitchen, sharp and ugly. "You're an old woman clinging to memories. You have no legal authority over this house, and if you keep interfering, I will handle it." "Handle it how?" I asked. He stepped closer. Too close. "I can have you evaluated," he hissed. "You're grieving, unstable. People your age get confused. I can put you in a care facility and make sure you don't poison the boys with your paranoia." My stomach dropped. "And if you don't cooperate," he continued, lowering his voice, "you won't see Eli again. I'll make sure of it. Text H now." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That was my breaking point. Not the house, not the insults. My grandson. "You wouldn't," I whispered. He smiled. I saw it then, the cruelty. Clean and deliberate. This wasn't a man overwhelmed by loss. This was a man who had been waiting for leverage. I took a step back, my legs suddenly weak. "You have no right." He shoved me. Not hard enough to knock me across the room, but enough to make me stumble, enough to remind me how fragile my body had become with age. I hit the edge of the counter and cried out, the pain sharp and humiliating. "Sit down," he barked, "and listen." Jaden finally looked at me then. Just for a second. There was something there, fear, maybe, or guilt, but he said nothing. Malcolm leaned over me. "You will stop interfering. You will let me sell the house, and you will keep your mouth shut." Unquote. I stared up at him, stunned. This was the man my daughter married, the man who kissed her forehead every night, the man who stood dry-eyed at her funeral. "I'm warning you," he said. "You push me, and you'll lose everything." When he finally left, slamming the door behind him, I stayed where I was for a long time. My hands shook, my heart raced. But underneath the fear, something else took shape. Resolve. Sarah hadn't died suddenly. I knew that now. And Malcolm wasn't just greedy. He was dangerous. That night, after the house finally fell quiet, I went upstairs to Sarah's bedroom. I wasn't searching for comfort anymore. I was searching for answers. That's when I noticed the bookshelf, the scuff on the floor, the slight shift in the frame, and behind it, hidden from everyone except the person who knew to look, was a safe. When it clicked open and I saw the red USB drive inside, along with the cash and the letter addressed to me, my blood ran cold. Before I even opened it, I understood something with terrifying clarity. Malcolm wasn't trying to sell the house because he wanted to move on. He was trying to sell it because he was afraid. Afraid of what my daughter had left behind. Afraid of what I was about to uncover. And afraid of how far I would go to protect my grandson. If you feel for Ethel, hit like and comment where you're watching from. You might be surprised who's watching with you. The letter was still in my hand when I heard the sound of a door slamming downstairs. I stayed frozen, sitting on the edge of Sarah's bed, my eyes fixed on the red USB drive inside the small safe. The envelope full of cash lay beside it, thick and creased, like it had been counted and recounted too many times. Everything in that little box screamed one word: emergency. My hands were trembling, but I reached for the USB and tucked it into my purse, then slid the letter back into its envelope and held it tight to my chest. I didn't read the rest, not yet. I couldn't. My heart was pounding, my ribs tight like a cage. I needed air. I needed time to think. But more than anything, I needed to know what Sarah had left behind and why she'd been too afraid to say it out loud while she was still alive. Downstairs, I moved carefully. My hip throbbed from where Malcolm had shoved me, but I kept upright, my back straight like my mama always taught me. You walk like you're still in control, even when the whole world's spinning out. The kitchen was dark now, only the stove light casting long shadows across the countertops. Sarah's picture still sat on the side table, but the frame had tipped over. When I bent to set it right, I noticed something odd. A crack. It ran through the glass, thin, sharp, like a hairline fracture in bone. It hadn't been there earlier. I picked it up slowly. In the photo, Sarah had her arm around Eli, her younger son. Her eyes were tired, but she was smiling. That picture was taken 6 months ago, right after Eli won his school science fair. She was wearing her red cardigan. I remembered it clearly because she'd called me the night before to ask if it was too bright for photos. I told her it was perfect. I stared at her face now, wondering how much pain she'd been hiding behind that smile. I put the picture back and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby." The next morning, I called my friend Will. He was a retired police officer, gray, stiff in the knees, and sharp as ever. He and his late wife Gloria had been our neighbors for 20 years before they moved into a senior community outside Portland. I trusted Will. More importantly, he didn't ask questions just to pass time. When he listened, it was because he wanted to know. He picked up on the second ring. "Ethel," he said, "was just thinking about you." "Will," I said, my voice already tight. "I found something bad, I think. I think Sarah was afraid for her life." Silence. Then, "Tell me everything, from the top." I told him about the safe, the USB, the cash, the letter. I didn't tell him about Malcolm pushing me, not yet. That part still made my skin burn with shame. "I need to see what's on that drive," I said. "But I don't trust doing it here. Not on her computer. Malcolm probably tracks everything." "You still have that old laptop I gave you?" Will asked. "Yeah, in my closet. Bring it to my place. Today. We'll open it together." I could hear the seriousness in his tone. Will had seen plenty in his years on the force. He didn't rattle easy. That afternoon, I packed the laptop, the USB, and the letter into a canvas grocery bag and drove to Will's place an hour away. As I pulled into his driveway, I saw him waiting on the porch with 2 mugs of coffee. The air smelled like pine and early spring. He gave me a look as I got out of the car. "Ethel," he said softly, "you look like hell." I gave him a half smile. "I feel worse." Inside, he set up the laptop on the kitchen table, and I handed him the USB. "Whatever's on there," I warned, "it's what got her killed." Will nodded. "Let's find out." He inserted the drive. It loaded slowly, the screen flickering with old files, a few folders labeled medical, bank, recordings. Will clicked into medical first. PDFs opened lab reports, blood work. Over and over, Sarah's iron levels were low, her blood pressure fluctuating. One report had a highlighted note, Traces of digoxin, inconsistent with prescribed dosage. What's digoxin? I asked. It's a heart medication, Will said, eyes narrowing. Used correctly, it stabilizes. Too much, it kills. My stomach twisted. Will moved to the bank folder. There were dozens of documents. Loan applications, account transfers, forged signatures. I saw Sarah's name on a dozen debt agreements, but the signatures didn't look right. Not the loops, not the spacing. She didn't sign those, I said. That's not her hand. Will nodded grimly. I've seen enough forged documents in my day. This is fraud. Then he opened the last folder. Recordings. There were 6 audio files, labeled only by date. He clicked on the most recent. Sarah's voice filled the room, quiet, shaking. If anything happens to me, Malcolm did it. He says I'm crazy, says I'm losing my mind. But I'm not. I know what he's doing. I found the pills he's been putting in my tea. I'm scared. I don't know who to tell. I couldn't breathe. Will leaned back in his chair, face pale. She knew, I whispered. She knew he was killing her. And no one believed her. Will didn't answer right away. He just sat there, jaw clenched, staring at the screen. This is enough to open an investigation, he finally said. But we have to move carefully. Why? I asked. Why not take it straight to the police? Because if Malcolm's smart, and it sounds like he is, he'll already be watching for this. If we show our hand too soon, he could disappear. Or worse. He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. Or worse, he could go after Eli. That night, I lay awake in Will's guest room, holding Sarah's letter to my chest, staring at the ceiling. I had proof. I had a partner, but I also had a grandson in that house. And I wasn't sure how much time we had left. I went back to Sarah's house the next morning. Will didn't want me to. He said it was too risky, that Malcolm could sense something shifting. But there are moments in a mother's life when caution takes a back seat to instinct, and my instinct was screaming one name over and over again. Eli. I needed to see him with my own eyes. I needed to know if he was safe. I rehearsed the lie the entire drive back into the city. Lies had never come easily to me. I was raised to believe the truth was armor, that if you wore it long enough, nothing could truly cut you. But Sarah's voice echoed in my head from that recording, shaking, afraid, and I understood something painful. Sometimes, the truth gets you killed. So I practiced the lie. I would say I'd come to pick up a few of Sarah's personal things. I would smile. I would apologize. I would pretend I was just a grieving old woman who'd lost her edge. When I pulled into the driveway, Malcolm's car was already there. That made my stomach sink. He hadn't gone to work. Or maybe he had nothing left to go to. I rang the doorbell. It took longer than it should have for someone to answer. When the door finally opened, Malcolm stood there blocking the entrance, his face already set in irritation. "What do you want?" he asked flatly. I swallowed. I came to see Eli, and to collect a few of Sarah's things. Clothes, photos. His eyes flicked over my shoulder, checking the street, the neighbors, always calculating. "Eli's not here," he said. My heart skipped. "What do you mean he's not here?" "He's staying with my sister for a while. Change of scenery. He needs distance from all this drama." Drama. That was what he called the aftermath of murdering his wife. "You didn't tell me," I said carefully. I didn't need to. I looked past him, into the living room. Jaden was sitting on the couch, feet up, phone in hand, headphones on. He didn't look at me, didn't even pretend to. "I want to talk to my grandson," I said. Malcolm stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I told you last night not to push me." "I'm not pushing," I replied, forcing calm. "I'm asking," as his grandmother. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're not in control here, Ethel," he said. "You keep forgetting that." I felt the old fear stir again, but this time, it didn't paralyze me. It sharpened me. "Where is he?" I asked again. Malcolm leaned in close enough that I could smell his cologne. Expensive. New. The kind of thing a grieving husband doesn't bother with. "Safe," he said, "as long as you behave." That was confirmation enough. I nodded slowly, playing the role. "Fine. I don't want trouble." He studied my face, searching for cracks. I gave him none. "I'll be back later for Sarah's jewelry," I added. "Her mother deserves that much." He hesitated, then stepped aside just enough to let me in. The house felt wrong. Not quiet, controlled. Drawers had been emptied, shelves half bare. The computer in Sarah's study was gone. So were her files. Malcolm hadn't waited long to start erasing her. I moved through the room slowly, touching small things. A scarf, a photo album. Each step was an act of reconnaissance. I was memorizing, counting, tracking what was missing. In Sarah's bedroom, I noticed the nightstand drawer was gone entirely. That drawer had always held her medication. I turned back toward the door just as Malcolm appeared behind me. "You done?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'll leave." As I passed him, he caught my arm hard. "You remember what I said," he murmured. "Stay out of my way." I met his eyes. "I hear you." That was the second lie. When I got back to Will's place, I told him everything. "He's moved, Eli," I said. "And he's cleaning house." Literally. Will rubbed his face, tired. "That means he knows time's against him." "He threatened me," I added quietly. "Said he'd keep Eli from me if I interfered." Will looked up sharply. "That's coercion. That's Malcolm." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Will said, "We need help. Official help. Someone still on the inside." He made a call. Not to the police department directly, but to a woman he trusted. Detective Karen Alvarez, early 40s, sharp, patient, known for handling domestic cases no one else wanted. She agreed to meet us that night. Karen listened without interrupting as we laid out everything: the USB, the recordings, the medical reports, Malcolm's threats, Eli's disappearance. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This is serious," she said. "But here's the problem. Without Eli physically in danger or a warrant, Malcolm can hide behind guardianship rights." "He killed his wife," I said. "I believe you," she replied gently. "But belief isn't evidence in court." I clenched my hands. "So what do we do?" Karen looked at me carefully. "We wait, and we watch. And the moment he slips just once, we move." Waiting felt unbearable. But I understood. That night, alone in Will's guest room, I reread Sarah's letter. One line stood out this time, burning through me. "If he moves Eli, he's running out of time." Malcolm was running, which meant his mistakes were coming. I didn't sleep much. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text. "Unknown number. Stop interfering. This is your last warning." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Then I did something Sarah would have been proud of. I took a screenshot, because from that moment on, every threat Malcolm made would become evidence. And I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was done being afraid. 2 days passed. 2 long, crawling days of pretending everything was normal while every fiber in my body screamed that it wasn't. I stayed with Will, drank coffee I couldn't taste, and called Malcolm once a day with the same question: "Can I speak to Eli?" Every time, he gave a new excuse. "He's sleeping. He's not here. He's with my sister. No cell reception up there." And every time, I logged the call, marked the hour, wrote down his exact words. Karen, the detective, kept in touch. She had begun looking into Malcolm's financials quietly, hoping something would surface to justify a formal investigation. But with no confirmed abuse, no visible bruises, and no access to Eli, everything stayed in limbo. Malcolm had bought himself time, but I knew time was exactly what he was trying to outrun. On the 3rd morning, I woke up with a terrible feeling in my chest. It wasn't pain exactly, just a weight, like something had shifted in the dark and was waiting for me to notice. I sat at the kitchen table, Sarah's letter beside me, staring out Will's window when my phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. I answered without thinking. There was silence on the line then, static, faint, like wind through dry leaves. And then, barely above a whisper, "Grandma?" I froze. "Eli?" I said quickly, trying to keep my voice calm. "Is that you?" There was a pause, then a shaky breath. "I'm scared," he said. "Dad said I'm not allowed to talk to anyone. He took my phone. I got this one from Uncle Leon's car when we stopped for gas, but I don't have long." End quote. "Where are you, baby?" I asked, gripping the edge of the table. "Can you tell me?" "I don't know." His voice cracked. "It's cold. There's trees. A cabin. He said we're going camping, but it's not camping. Is Jaden there?" "No, just Dad and me. He said he's teaching me how to live off the grid. That phrase stopped my breath cold. "Listen to me, Eli," I said. "You did the right thing calling me. Can you stay on the line a little longer?" "No," he whispered. "I hear him. He's coming back." "Eli, I love you, Grandma." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, shaking. Will rushed in from the porch when he heard me call his name. I told him everything, word for word. He didn't hesitate. Within minutes, he had Karen on the line, and I put the call on speaker so she could hear the fear in my voice. "He's isolated, that child," I said. "And I think he's planning something permanent." Karen swore under her breath. "Do you think you could get him to call again?" "I doubt it. Malcolm probably already found the phone." "Then we need to narrow the location." He mentioned trees, cold, a cabin. "Could be his cousin's hunting lodge," Will offered. "North of Bend, remote, no cell towers for miles." Karen wrote it down. "I'll start the paperwork. With the call and the USB evidence, I can push for a child welfare check, but it'll take hours." "Too long," I said. Karen sighed. "I know, but if you go there yourself, and he's armed, I won't go in. I just want to see if Eli's really there." Karen paused. "If you can confirm the boy's presence, I can call it in. But Ethel, don't engage. Don't let him see you." "I understand." I didn't. "Not really." But I said I did. That afternoon, Will and I packed up the car. He brought his old binoculars, a loaded flashlight, and something else I didn't expect, his old service revolver, tucked quietly into the glove box. I gave him a look. He said nothing. The drive took nearly 4 hours. As we climbed into the high forest roads north of Bend, the temperature dropped. Pines crowded the shoulder, thick and unwelcoming. By late afternoon, the sun had started to dip low, throwing long shadows across the hills. Then we saw it. A silver SUV, parked crooked along a gravel road leading into the trees. Another 100 feet in, behind a chain-link gate, was a weathered log cabin. Smoke curled from the chimney. "This is it," Will whispered. We pulled over and cut the engine. Using the binoculars, I scanned the property. At first, nothing moved. Then I saw him, Eli, sitting alone on the porch steps, bundled in a hoodie far too thin for the cold. His hands were in his lap, his head down. He wasn't playing, wasn't reading, just sitting. Not 10 feet away, Malcolm paced with a cigarette, talking into a phone. Will grunted. "Got him?" I snapped a photo with my phone. "Send it to Karen," I said. "She can use this." As Will typed, I kept watching my grandson. I saw him lift his head, saw the way he glanced around, not bored, not curious, just alert, on edge. Then, in a moment I'll never forget, his eyes locked onto mine. He couldn't see me clearly from that distance, but I think he knew. Somehow, he knew I'd come. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just mouthed something, 3 words. "Help me, please." I felt something break inside me. Karen messaged back seconds later. "Hold your position. Police en route. Do not engage." We stayed there, hidden, watching. 10 minutes. 20. Finally, sirens. In the distance at first, then closer, louder. Malcolm turned, startled. I watched him snatch Eli by the arm and try to drag him toward the SUV. But before he could, 2 cruisers tore down the gravel path. Officers shouted. Malcolm froze. Eli broke free and ran, straight toward us. I opened the car door just in time to catch him in my arms. He buried his face into my coat, trembling. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I did," I said, holding him tighter than I ever had before. And for the first time since Sarah died, I felt like I could breathe again. I held Eli in my arms long after the sirens faded. His body was shaking, not from the cold, but from something deeper. A fear that had settled into his bones, a fear I recognized, the same kind that lived in Sarah's voice on that recording. An officer wrapped a blanket around him and asked if he was hurt. Eli just shook his head, buried deeper into my side. He hadn't said a word since the moment he ran into my arms. Malcolm was handcuffed on the ground, surrounded by 3 officers. He shouted protests, threats, legal jargon. He said I was kidnapping his son. He said the cops had no right. He called me unstable. But no one was listening to him anymore. Not even Jaden, who had shown up an hour later with Malcolm's cousin. Jaden stood back, arms folded, looking lost, hollow. The bravado was gone. When I caught his eye, he looked away. Karen arrived just before sundown. She took one look at Eli and her face changed. Softened. She knelt beside him. "Eli, do you know who I am?" He nodded slightly. "I'm a police detective. You're safe now, I promise." Eli looked at me, eyes wide, waiting for permission. I gave him a small nod. Karen asked gentle questions. Where they'd been staying, what Malcolm said to him, what he was made to do. Eli was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, "He made me burn Mom's letters." Karen blinked. "What letters, sweetie?" "The ones she wrote to me. She kept them in a box. He said they were full of lies. He said if I didn't burn them, he'd tell people I was dangerous, like her." Karen looked at me sharply. I could see the wheels turning in her head. Eli went on, voice barely audible. "He said Mom got sick because she didn't obey. He said women who don't listen make people suffer." My stomach twisted. Karen nodded slowly. "Did he ever hurt you?" Eli hesitated, then shook his head. "Not like that. But he scared me all the time." She didn't push further. She stood, turned to one of the officers. "I want him booked for custodial interference and endangerment, and flag this for immediate CPS review. We're escalating." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. Later, back at Will's house, Eli curled up on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket the officers gave him. He still hadn't said much. I didn't push. We'd been through enough screaming, enough fear. Instead, I made his favorite dinner boxed mac and cheese with too much butter and sliced hot dogs. He picked at it, but I could tell the comfort was starting to work. That food always brought him back to being little, sitting at Sarah's table with sticky hands and ketchup on his chin. When he finally spoke, it was quiet. "I heard them fight," he said. I turned from the sink. "You and your dad?" "No, Mom and Dad. Before she died, I was in my room. She was crying. She said she didn't feel safe. She said he was trying to take everything from her." I sat beside him. "Do you remember what he said?" Eli nodded. He said she was making it worse, that if she didn't stop asking questions, he'd fix it his own way. My heart broke all over again. "He lied to me," Eli whispered. He said she had a weak heart, that it was just her time, but she was so scared. I heard it. "You're not crazy for remembering that," I said, brushing his hair back gently. "You're brave for holding on to it." He looked up at me. "Am I going to have to testify?" I hesitated. "Maybe, but not right away, and not alone." "Will they believe me?" "They already do," I said, "because your mom left us proof, and you gave us more." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "I want to see where she's buried." "We'll go tomorrow," I promised. "We'll bring flowers. You can say whatever you want." That night, while Eli slept in the guest room, Will and I sat in the kitchen with Karen. She had brought more documents, copies of the bank fraud evidence, Sarah's medical files, the recording transcripts. "We've got enough to charge him with multiple counts of financial fraud," she said. "But if we want murder, we need more." "Like what?" I asked. "A pattern. A motive. Witnesses who saw his behavior shift. And someone who can tie him directly to the tampered medication." I reached into my purse and pulled out the torn prescription paper I'd found buried in Sarah's nightstand. I hadn't shown it to anyone yet, just a note with Malcolm's handwriting, adjusting a dosage. It was unsigned. But it was something. Karen examined it closely. "We might be able to match his writing. If this proves he was managing her meds without consent, that's a major violation." She paused. "We also need to talk to the pharmacist who filled this. If we can prove he manipulated dosages, that's intent." I leaned back in my chair. "You're building a case," I said. Karen nodded. "Brick by brick." I looked toward the guest room, where Eli slept. "And if the system doesn't finish it," I whispered, "I will." Karen didn't argue. She just looked at me and said, "Then let's make sure we get it right." The cemetery was quiet that morning. Eli stood beside me, clutching a bunch of white daisies, his mom's favorite. The wind played with the edges of his hoodie, and his hands, though still small, had a steadiness that reminded me of Sarah. "I thought this would feel weird," he said softly, staring down at the polished granite marker. "But it doesn't." I nodded. "It's okay to feel anything, baby. Sad, angry, even nothing." End quote. He was quiet for a long while. "I want to tell her something," he whispered. "Go ahead." He stepped forward and knelt in front of the stone. "I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye," he began, voice low and trembling. "I should have known something was wrong. I should have told Grandma sooner. I should have." "No," I said, kneeling beside him. "Don't carry that. You're a child. It was never your job to protect her. It was hers to protect you. And she did. She left us what we needed. She made sure you'd be okay." Eli's tears spilled silently, and I wrapped my arm around him as he leaned into my side. We stayed like that for a long time. When we finally rose, he placed the flowers gently at the base of the stone. "I'm ready," he said. I wasn't sure if he meant ready to leave the cemetery or ready for the fight that lay ahead. Either way, I believed him. Back at Will's house, Karen met us with news. "The pharmacist who filled Sarah's prescription 6 months ago agreed to talk," she said. "His name's Tom Lively, retired now but sharp, said he remembers your daughter." We sat around Will's kitchen table again, the old laptop open, the USB drive now sealed in an evidence bag beside it. "Lively," said Malcolm, "used to come in to pick up Sarah's medication," Karen continued. "At first it wasn't unusual. Lots of spouses do that. But then he started showing up alone more often, asking for dosage changes, saying Sarah was forgetful and needed less." "Did the pharmacist agree?" I asked. "Not always. Lively said he flagged a few requests as suspicious. One time he refused to fill a change because the dosage didn't match the doctor's order." Karen slid a small printed report toward me. It was an internal log from the pharmacy, dated 4 months before Sarah's death. "In the notes," she said, pointing to the highlighted line, Lively wrote, "Husband requested reduction in digoxin dose. Denied. Told to follow up with physician. Husband irate." My hands clenched. So he tried to cut her meds, maybe to worsen her condition, or mask symptoms. Either way, he was meddling. Karen pulled out a second file. "This is the kicker," she said. "We requested Sarah's full medical history and compared her recent test results with those from a year earlier. Her heart function was stable until around 6 months before her death. After that, things declined rapidly." "Coinciding with Malcolm taking control of her meds," Will said. Karen nodded. "Can we prove it was deliberate?" I asked. "Not yet, but this pattern helps. We're building intent. The more we stack, the better chance we have of pressing homicide charges." I sat back, exhaling slowly. "We need more," I said. "Something that ties him directly to the act." And 2017 manned, that afternoon, I went back to Sarah's house. With Karen's approval, and Will accompanying me, I returned to what used to be her safe place. Her kitchen, her office, her sanctuary. Now it was just a hollow house with all the warmth drained out of it. Jaden met us at the door. He looked older than he had last week. Maybe it was the shadows under his eyes, or the slumped posture of a boy who finally realized the man he called father wasn't a hero, but a fraud. "I want to help," he said before I could speak. I hesitated. "You were quiet for too long." "I know, but I didn't understand. I thought Mom was just sick, tired." Dad said she was dramatic. "Did you ever see him give her anything?" Karen asked, stepping beside me. Jaden paused. "Tea. All the time. Every night." She stopped drinking wine. Dad started making her herbal tea. Said it helped her sleep. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Did you ever drink it?" He shook his head. "I hate tea. There isn't an action of that with Manating. Do you remember which kind it was?" He shrugged. "Something in a brown tin. I can check." We followed him into the kitchen. Jaden opened a cabinet and pulled out a decorative metal container. It looked like an old cocoa tin, but inside were loose dried herbs and tea leaves. Karen carefully took it, sealing it into a bag. "We'll test it." Back in Sarah's office, I stood staring at her desk. The drawers were empty. Malcolm had scrubbed everything, but I knew Sarah. She was meticulous. She never deleted anything. I opened her laptop again, this time with a different purpose. Emails, folders, drafts. Most of it was mundane client notes, dental records, appointment reminders, until I found a folder labeled Private, Password Protected. I tried the names of her sons, her birth date. Nothing worked. Then I tried her favorite phrase, "Truth is the only shield." I typed it in. The folder opened. Inside were several audio recordings. One caught my eye. Oct 9, Doctor. Patel visit. I clicked play. Sarah's voice came through, clear and determined. Today, I asked Dr. Patel to test my medication levels. I told him I suspected someone was altering my pills. He was kind, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Said stress can cause paranoia, but I know my body. I know my husband. If anything happens to me, someone needs to check. Karen looked at me. This is gold. It's a will, I whispered. Not the legal kind. The kind that tells the truth when no one else will. She nodded slowly. We're close. That night, after Eli went to sleep, I sat by the window, staring at the stars. I imagined Sarah out there somewhere, watching us work. I hoped she knew we heard her. Really heard her. And we weren't going to stop until the world did too. I woke to the sound of a screen door creaking. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Will's house was quiet. The kind of quiet you only get in the woods, a hush so thick you could hear a pine needle drop. But then I heard it again. The screen door, followed by soft footsteps on the porch. I got out of bed and moved slowly toward the window. I peeked through the curtain and caught a glimpse of a figure heading toward the road. Small, barefoot. Eli. I was down the stairs and out the door before I realized I was even moving. He stood at the edge of the gravel path, arms folded against the chill, staring at the trees. Eli? I called, careful not to startle him. What are you doing out here, sweetheart? He turned to me, eyes puffy, but not with sleep. I had a dream, he said. Mom was calling me. She said there's something we're missing. My heart clenched. I knelt beside him. What do you mean? She was in the dream. She was holding something. A necklace. She kept saying, it's not gone. He doesn't know. I have new writing this. I didn't say anything for a moment. Just pulled him into a hug. Sometimes, children carry messages we're too cynical to believe in. And sometimes, they're exactly the ones who see the truth most clearly. Later that morning, I sat at Sarah's old vanity, brushing my fingers across the surface. I remembered her sitting there when she was 16, doing her makeup for prom. Her little radio playing some boy band she swore she'd love forever. I opened the drawers again, slower this time, looking not for what was there, but for what wasn't. One corner of the drawer stuck slightly when I pulled it, just a fraction. Like something was beneath the liner. I peeled it back. There, tucked between the wood and the velvet, was a thin chain, a small pendant in the shape of a heart. I remembered it. It had belonged to her grandmother, and Sarah only wore it on special occasions. But it wasn't the necklace that caught my eye, it was the flash drive taped behind it. Tiny, red, just like the one from the safe. My pulse quickened. I drove back to Will's and plugged it into the laptop, hands trembling. One folder, safe. 2. Inside, 3 video files. Karen arrived just as I was about to open the first one. You're going to want to see this, I told her. We sat together at the table, the laptop between us. Will stood in the doorway, arms folded, eyes hard. I clicked the first video. Sarah appeared on screen, sitting at her desk in what looked like the guest bedroom. She looked tired, older than she was. The lighting was dim, the window shades drawn, but her voice was steady. If you're watching this, I didn't make it, and I'm sorry. I tried everything to be believed, but Malcolm's too careful, too charming. To everyone else, he's the grieving husband. But I know what he's done. She took a shaky breath. He started switching my pills 6 months ago. I found empty capsules in the trash. When I asked him, he said I was losing my mind. Then he made me stop seeing Dr. Patel, said it was wasting money. I went to urgent care once just to be safe. They said my potassium levels were dangerous. I knew then. The video cut to black. The second file loaded automatically. This time, Sarah was holding the cocoa tin. He puts it in the tea, she whispered. Not every night, just enough to keep me tired. Slow. I had it tested. There's valerian root, sure, but also traces of something else, something synthetic. The lab wouldn't give me details without a formal request. She held up a small, sealed envelope. I'm hiding the results in Eli's art portfolio. Malcolm would never look there. Karen grabbed her notebook. That's the break. We find that envelope, we get the lab results. Will was already reaching for his car keys. I hit play on the third and final video. Sarah was crying. Not sobbing. Not hysterical. Just tears falling silently as she looked into the camera. I don't know what day it is anymore, But I know I'm running out of time. Please protect my boys. I don't trust Malcolm with them. He says Jaden will be a man soon, that he needs to learn to be strong. And Eli, she choked. He's still just a boy. He still believes in monsters under the bed. I just didn't think I married one. Then she reached forward and turned off the camera. The room was silent. Karen looked at me, her face pale. If those lab results are real, we've got him. On attempted poisoning, endangerment, and if the levels are high enough, murder. We rushed to the storage unit Malcolm had rented to store Sarah's old art supplies after her death. Jaden had given us the key, after quietly siding with the truth. Inside, everything was neatly packed in boxes labeled by year. We found Eli's portfolio in the 2022 bin. Tucked inside a plastic sleeve was a sealed envelope, addressed in Sarah's neat handwriting. Lab results, urgent. Karen slid it open right there. The paper was official. Dated 3 months before Sarah's death. It listed multiple toxic agents present in trace amounts in Sarah's blood work, none of which had been prescribed. At the bottom, a handwritten note from the lab technician. Patient advised to consult with physician. Results may indicate environmental exposure or deliberate adulteration of medications. Karen stared at it. This is it, she whispered. The linchpin. That night, she made the arrest official. Malcolm was already in custody for child endangerment and fraud. Now, he was being charged with murder in the second degree with intent and premeditation. It wouldn't bring Sarah back, but it would make sure he never hurt anyone again. It's one thing to uncover the truth. It's another to speak it out loud, in a room full of strangers, with the man who destroyed your family sitting just feet away. The trial began 6 weeks after the final charges were filed. The prosecutor was a lean woman with a calm fire in her eyes. Her name was Amelia Grant. She'd spent years handling domestic violence and homicide cases, and she took to Sarah's story like it was personal. Maybe it was. I never asked. Malcolm had hired a private attorney, a slick man with shiny cufflinks and a condescending smirk. The kind of man who spoke in rhetorical questions and raised his eyebrows like punctuation. He painted Malcolm as a devoted husband, blindsided by mental illness. Claimed Sarah had a history of emotional instability, that she overdosed herself out of despair. But the evidence didn't lie. The pharmacy logs, the handwritten dosage change, the lab results, the hidden video confessions. One by one, Amelia walked the jury through them, building the case like a staircase, each step undeniable. Then came my turn. I was called to the stand on the 4th day of testimony. I wore Sarah's favorite navy blue scarf, the one she used to borrow from me and forget to return. I'd found it tucked behind a stack of recipe books in her kitchen. I took it as a sign. "Please state your name," Amelia said gently. "Ethel Duval. And your relation to the victim?" "I'm her mother." End quote. My voice was steady, but I gripped the edges of the witness stand like a lifeline. "Mrs. Duval," Amelia continued, "can you tell the court what you observed in the months leading up to your daughter's death?" I told them everything. Not just the events, but the feelings. The look in Sarah's eyes that last Thanksgiving, the hesitation in her voice during our final phone call, the way Eli clung to me the day after the funeral like a child shipwrecked at sea. I described the morning Malcolm tried to force me to sign away Sarah's house. How he screamed. How he shoved me. How he threatened to lock me away and keep Eli from me. There was a shift in the room when I said that. A ripple of discomfort. People didn't want to believe that evil could wear khakis and drive a Volvo. But I was done softening the truth for their comfort. "He used her illness as a smokescreen," I said, looking directly at the jury. "He knew her medication was critical. He made sure to be the one who controlled it, and when she got too close to the truth, he made sure she couldn't tell anyone." Amelia let the silence stretch. Then she asked, "Did you find any direct evidence yourself?" I nodded. "A USB. Hidden in a necklace case. Sarah left behind videos. She knew she was in danger. She was trying to protect her sons. And what was on the videos?" "Her voice," I said, "her story, her fear, and her strength." Amelia paused. "Thank you, Mrs. Duval. It's not submitted." The defense attorney stood next. "Mrs. Duval," he said with a practiced smile, "isn't it true that your daughter struggled with anxiety for years?" "She struggled with a controlling husband," I snapped. He raised an eyebrow. "But you never saw him physically harm her, correct?" "No," I said, meeting his gaze, but I saw her disappear piece by piece. You don't have to hit someone to break them. The courtroom stirred. He shifted tactics. Isn't it possible that your grief is coloring your perception? That you're seeing things the way you want to see them, not how they actually happened? I leaned forward slightly. My daughter died with poison in her system. The same poison found in tea Malcolm brewed for her every night. Her voice is recorded, her suspicions documented, her blood work confirms exposure. If that's grief talking, then maybe grief is a damn good detective. There was a murmur in the jury box. Amelia didn't even object. She let it stand. The judge called for a break. As I stepped down, I passed Malcolm. He looked at me calm, composed, the same smug expression he wore at Sarah's funeral. But I noticed something new now. A flicker of uncertainty. A crack. After me, they called Jaden. His testimony wasn't long, but it was devastating. He talked about the tea, about how Sarah changed, how she slept more, cried quietly, apologized for things she didn't do. He said, I thought she was getting weaker, but now I know he was making her weak. Eli wasn't allowed to testify. He was too young, but his voice lived in the evidence, the recording of his whispered call, his plea for help, and the drawings he'd made at therapy. One, in particular, was entered into evidence. It showed a house, with a tiny figure standing at the window, looking out. In the yard was another figure, larger, with angry eyes. The child inside had a speech bubble. Mom said not to open the door. You could have heard a pin drop. Closing arguments came on the 9th day. Amelia stood before the jury, her voice steady but full of restrained passion. She knew, she said. Sarah Duvall knew she was being erased, slowly, methodically. She left behind everything she could, and now it's our job to listen. The defense tried to paint Sarah as fragile. That word again, but it was too late. The truth had taken root. When the jury returned the next afternoon, the foreman stood and read the verdict. Guilty, on all counts. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat perfectly still, Sarah's scarf around my neck, my grandson holding my hand. And I thought to myself, you did it, baby girl. They finally heard you. I changed the locks the very next day. It might seem like a small thing, compared to everything we'd been through, the arrest, the trial, the verdict. But for me, it was the most symbolic act of all. Malcolm no longer had any keys. Not to Sarah's house, not to our family, not to anything he once used to control and isolate. I watched the locksmith work in silence, the crisp morning sun casting long shadows over the porch. Eli sat inside with a puzzle on the living room rug, humming to himself a sound I hadn't heard in months. Jaden was upstairs, clearing out the last of Malcolm's belongings. He hadn't said much, but his determination was steady. Each shirt, each watch, each book that went into the donation bin felt like another cord cut loose. We were reclaiming everything, one drawer at a time. Will brought us donuts that morning, still warm, wrapped in the paper bag from Henry's down on Main. I hadn't had a real appetite since Sarah died, but something about that old-fashioned cinnamon sugar made me feel human again. You planning to move back in? He asked, handing me a cup of coffee. I looked around the kitchen. The walls still held Sarah's calendar, half filled with appointments she never got to keep. The counter still had the ceramic cookie jar she bought on clearance at the fall market, shaped like a pumpkin. Her handwriting was still scrawled on the fridge in dry erase marker. Buy more milk, love, Mom. I'm not sure, I said, but it feels like the right place to start over. For Eli. Will nodded. You don't have to rush anything. I knew that. But there was something important about rooting ourselves here again, taking up the space Malcolm tried to erase us from. Karen stopped by that afternoon. Not as a detective, but as a friend. Her blazer was gone, replaced by a cardigan and jeans. Her expression was softer, the weight of the case finally lifting off her shoulders. I wanted to bring this by, she said, handing me a manila envelope. Inside were copies of the court transcripts, the evidence inventory, and most meaningful of all, a photo. Sarah, from her driver's license. They'd printed it for her file, but Karen said she thought I should have one that wasn't grainy or sad. She deserved to be remembered as herself, Karen said, not just a victim. I clutched the photo to my chest. Thank you. Eli peeked out from behind the hallway. Karen crouched down. Hey, champ, how are you feeling? Better, he said. "The nightmares aren't as loud." She smiled. "That's a good sign." Then she looked at me. "You know, he might benefit from talking to someone regularly. There's a woman I know, Dr. Harding. She specializes in grief and trauma for kids." I nodded. "We'll go." After Karen left, I finally allowed myself to exhale. We weren't running anymore. That night, Jaden came downstairs with a box of things. "Found this in Dad's closet," he said, setting it on the coffee table. "Figured you might want to go through it before I toss it." Inside were documents, old tax records, insurance policies, and tucked in the bottom a handwritten journal. I hadn't known Malcolm kept one. Jaden hovered, unsure. "You want me to stay?" he asked. I shook my head. "Go rest, honey. I'll handle it." He hesitated, then gave me a quick hug before disappearing upstairs. I opened the journal slowly. It wasn't long, just a few pages. Most of it was filled with jumbled thoughts, arrogant musings about power, control, and fear. But one entry stood out. "She found the pills. She's asking questions. I thought I had more time. If she leaves, I lose everything. She doesn't understand it's not about her. It's about the legacy, the image. I can't let her take that from me." I closed the book with shaking hands. Legacy. That was always it for him. Not love. Not family. Image. Sarah had once told me that Malcolm was obsessed with appearances, that he believed everything had to be polished, curated. He picked their clothes, their vacation spots, even the way she should style her hair for Christmas photos. I never thought much of it. Now I saw the full picture. He didn't kill her out of rage. He killed her because she was finally willing to mess up the portrait he spent years painting. The next day, we scattered some of Sarah's ashes in the meadow behind Will's house, the place she once said reminded her of childhood. Wildflowers were just starting to bloom. Eli held the small wooden box, his hands steady. "Goodbye, Mommy," he whispered. Jaden stood behind him, a hand on his shoulder. We said nothing more. The wind did all the talking. It was almost summer by then, the kind of early June day where the air hums with heat and children's laughter echoes from yard to yard. Eli had taken to drawing again. His latest was a picture of our family standing beneath a big tree, all holding hands. He'd added Sarah, too. A soft outline above us, like a cloud with a smile. We were doing okay. Not whole, not healed, but okay, until the phone rang. It was just after lunch. I was folding laundry, Jaden's jeans, Eli's tiny socks when I heard the landline ring in the kitchen. I didn't think much of it. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something nudged me. I picked up. "Mrs. Duval?" a male voice asked. "Yes?" "This is Detective Monroe with the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. I'm following up on the Malcolm Langley case." My spine stiffened. "It's closed," I said carefully. "He's in prison." "Yes, ma'am, but we've had a development. And to Grace, I'm starred within Mary." He hesitated, and I felt the floor shift beneath me. "We were contacted by another woman, a former colleague of Mr. Langley's. She claims he may have had a previous incident involving another partner." I gripped the phone tighter. "Another woman?" "Yes. A woman named Dana Pierce. She lived in Maryland around 15 years ago. Claims she was engaged to Mr. Langley back when he went by Malcolm Lane." I sat down, laundry forgotten. "She said she became severely ill over several months," he continued, "and then Malcolm disappeared. She recovered eventually but never found out why he left. When she saw the case on the news, she recognized him." "Oh my God," I whispered. "We're reopening a cold case investigation to determine if there's a pattern. Based on your daughter's case and the new evidence, it's possible he's done this before." The idea made me sick and furious. He hadn't just stolen Sarah's life. He'd practiced. "Why didn't this come up in the trial?" I asked. "There was no record of the alias. He changed names, states, even his career path. But Miss Pierce kept a photo, and it's him." I thanked the detective and hung up. Then I sat in silence, staring at the phone, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. When Jaden came downstairs, I told him. He looked stunned. "He did this. Before?" I don't know how far it went, but it wasn't just Sarah. End quote. That night, I called Karen. She confirmed what the detective said, but added more. "Turns out there were inconsistencies in his employment history," she explained. "He worked under different versions of his name in 3 different states, but we never had a reason to dig that far. Until now." I asked her what it meant. Best case? She said. It adds years to his sentence. Worst case? We're dealing with a serial offender. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in Sarah's living room with a notebook, trying to piece together timelines, places, patterns. He'd been hiding in plain sight for years, changing names, manipulating women, isolating them, making them doubt their own minds. Sarah wasn't his first, and maybe not his last if we hadn't stopped him. The next morning, I met Karen at the station. She handed me a copy of the old case file from Maryland. The woman Dana had written a detailed letter explaining how she'd gone from healthy and happy to weak, confused, and paranoid in less than 6 months. Doctors thought it was anxiety. One even prescribed her antidepressants. Sound familiar? She said Malcolm left after she confronted him about inconsistencies in their finances. Then he vanished. No goodbye, no closure, just gone. I thought I was crazy, she wrote. But now I know. I was lucky to survive. Karen had already contacted her, and Dana was willing to testify if needed. As I read her letter, I cried. Not just for Sarah, but for all the women like her, who second-guessed their instincts, who were told they were too emotional, who weren't believed until it was too late. I thought about that journal Malcolm had kept, his twisted philosophy about control, his obsession with legacy. He hadn't loved Sarah. He'd chosen her, like prey. That evening, I stood in the backyard, watching Eli and Jaden toss a frisbee under the wide summer sky. For a moment, I let myself feel peace. But I also felt purpose. Sarah's case was just the beginning. Karen and I made a plan to take everything we'd learned, the evidence, the warning signs, the survivor testimonies, and create a resource, a website, a public archive. So no woman would be alone in her suspicion. So no family would wait too long to act. So no predator could hide behind good manners and perfect hair. It was time to make noise, to break every last silence he left behind. The first time I spoke to Dana Pierce, it was over a choppy Zoom connection. She wore a plain gray sweater and no makeup, her hair tied back in a messy bun. But her eyes, those sharp, wary eyes, had the weight of someone who'd walked through fire barefoot and somehow come out the other side. "Ethel," she said, giving me a faint nod. "I'm so sorry about your daughter." I swallowed hard. "And I'm sorry about what he did to you. I wish I could say Sarah was the first." Dana gave a dry laugh. "I used to wish I was the last." We talked for nearly an hour that morning. She told me about how they'd met at a leadership conference in Baltimore. He was charming, brilliant, seemingly humble, said he worked in financial planning, told her she was too smart to be single. End quote. "He made me feel like I was the answer to a question I didn't know I'd been asking," she said. "Then one day, I started feeling sick. First, it was headaches, then fatigue, then the weight loss. I thought I was dying," she said, "but the tests were always inconclusive. And when she started asking questions about their finances, about his missing work hours, about why he always insisted on making her tea, he turned cold. Within a week, he disappeared," Dana said. "No note, no forwarding address, just gone." She reported it to police back then. But with no evidence of foul play and no trace of Malcolm Lane, the case went cold. She moved on, rebuilt, quietly, until she saw Sarah's story on the local news. "And I remembered the tea," Dana whispered. After we ended the call, I sat in silence. It was eerie how similar their stories were, almost scripted. And suddenly, I realized something. Malcolm didn't just control people. He rehearsed them. That night, I met with Karen at the public library downtown. She'd brought stacks of boxes, Sarah's full case file, Malcolm's employment records, travel receipts, aliases, emails. We spread it out over 2 long tables and got to work. Our goal was simple: connect the dots. We knew of 2 victims. Were there more? Karen drew a timeline on a giant whiteboard, plotting every address, every job, every date. "Look at this," she said, pointing to 2014. He worked for an insurance company in Ohio under the name M. Langley. Left after only 6 months. No forwarding employer. The HR director said he was discreet, distant, and didn't like questions. I checked the records. During those 6 months, a woman named Nicole Evans filed a police report after her roommate died suddenly undiagnosed heart failure. Nicole said she didn't trust her roommate's boyfriend, but nothing ever came of it. The boyfriend's name? Mark Lane. We stared at each other. 3 names, 3 women, 3 states. This was no accident. Karen exhaled. We have a pattern. By the following week, with help from Amelia and a forensic behavior specialist, we had compiled a 40-page profile. Malcolm had changed names, moved every 12 to 24 months, and inserted himself into the lives of successful, independent women. His MO was clear: charm, isolate, weaken, vanish. He left just enough space to be above suspicion, until Sarah fought back. She was his last, I said aloud, standing in Karen's office. Because she didn't just get sick, she got angry, she documented, she prepared. Karen nodded. And now she's the reason we can go back and give names to the women before her. They reached out to Nicole Evans, and then to others. Dana came to town to give her statement in person. She stayed with me and Eli for a few days. We cooked together, talked late into the night, and I realized something unexpected. I didn't just admire her. I liked her. There was a grit beneath her gentleness, a humor that peeked through her trauma. We shared coffee in the mornings and silence when words failed us. She didn't try to fix me, and I didn't try to fix her. We just existed, 2 mothers, 2 survivors, connected by the same ghost. On her last night, we sat on the porch. I used to think no one would believe me, she said, that I was crazy, that he'd won. I shook my head. But you left a trail. You survived. You slowed him down. Dana smiled faintly. Sarah finished it, didn't she? I looked up at the stars. Yes, she did. Eli came out in his pajamas, holding a drawing. Is this you and your friend? He asked. He'd drawn Dana and me holding hands under a giant heart. Inside it were Sarah's initials. Dana took the drawing and held it to her chest. Can I keep this? She asked him. He nodded solemnly. That was the night I realized healing wasn't a place you arrived at. It was a path you chose, over and over, even when the world had tried to break you, especially then. It started with a drawer I hadn't opened. Sarah's writing desk sat beneath the front window, bathed in light from morning to dusk. She used to call it her thinking spot, said something about the way the sunlight hit the page made her words feel more honest. I'd cleaned nearly every room in that house, packed away all the artifacts of pain and memory, but the desk I left it for last. Maybe part of me was afraid of what I'd find, or maybe I just wasn't ready to say goodbye to her voice. But that afternoon, while Eli was napping and Jaden was at a volunteer shift at the rec center, I sat at her desk and opened the bottom drawer. At first it looked like any drawer: paper clips, old receipts, a few dried pens. But beneath it all was a bundle of envelopes tied with a pale blue ribbon. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. Each envelope was addressed. Each one had a name: Jaden, Eli, me, Dad, Karen, even one for Malcolm. None of them were sealed. Some were finished, some half-written. The ink had faded on a few, and I recognized the careful slope of her handwriting, always a little more upright when she was emotional. I didn't read Malcolm's. Not yet. Not ever, maybe. But I opened the one addressed to me. Mom, I know you're probably mad. That's okay. I've been mad too. But I need you to know that I never stopped believing you loved me, even when I pulled away, even when I didn't call back. I was drowning, and it was easier to do it quietly than ask for help and feel like a burden. But you were always my lighthouse. If you're reading this, then I guess I didn't make it. And that breaks my heart more than I can write. But I need you to do something for me. Protect my boys, and forgive yourself. For not seeing, for not stopping it sooner. You didn't fail me, Mom. He did. And I promise, if you keep listening, you'll hear me every time you fight for them. I love you. I always loved you. Sarah. The tears came hard, fast, and silent. I clutched the letter to my chest and rocked forward, the way I used to when she was a baby and cried at 2 a.m., needing nothing but my arms. It didn't erase the ache, but it gave me something else. Permission to forgive, to keep going. The next day, I gave Jaden his letter. He read it in silence, his back straight, his jaw tight. When he finished, he folded it carefully, placed it in his wallet, and said, I want to read this every day. Eli's letter was simpler. It had a crayon drawing inside. Sarah must have drawn it with him once and saved it. The note said, "You're going to be amazing. Don't let anyone tell you different. And always be kind, like Grandma. That's the bravest thing a person can be." And creasting, Eli didn't say much after, but he hugged me harder than ever before. Karen's letter made her cry. I handed it to her outside the station, and she read it in her car before walking back in with her eyes rimmed red and her mouth set in a tight line. "She knew," Karen said later. "She knew I'd never stop until it made sense." I smiled. "She trusted you." She was right. Even Will got a letter, though it was barely a note, just a quick thanks for being the quiet strength in the room. He tucked it into his jacket pocket like a keepsake. The letter to Malcolm sat on the desk for a while. I didn't open it, but it haunted me. So one night, I lit a fire in the old metal barrel behind the house, tucked the envelope between the logs, and watched it burn. He didn't deserve her words, and I didn't need to carry them. Instead, I wrote my own. I started a journal. For Sarah. For me. For the healing that never seems linear, but still shows up. The first entry was simple. "You were right. He was a monster. But you were stronger." And then the next entry was about Eli's school play. And the third was about the cake Jaden burned but laughed about. The fourth entry, I wrote from the hospital waiting room. Will had sprained his ankle helping Eli climb a tree. I wrote about how we'd all gotten older, but that didn't mean we stopped climbing. By the end of the month, the house felt more like a home again. The air felt easier to breathe. One afternoon, while Eli and I were baking banana bread, he looked up from his stool and asked, "Grandma, is Mommy still mad?" I paused, then leaned down. "No, baby. She was never mad at you, and wherever she is now, she's smiling." He thought about that for a second. Then he smiled too. And I swear, in that moment, she was right there between us, flower in her hair, hands on our shoulders, heart still beating through ours. It was the first Sunday in August when Jaden came into the kitchen holding a flyer. He looked taller that morning, maybe because he stood up straighter, like something inside him had settled. "Grandma," he said, laying the paper on the table. "The school's doing a community remembrance event next month. They want people to speak about someone they lost. Not just to honor them, but to talk about what they stood for." I looked at the flyer. There was a sunflower printed at the top, and a quote in bold across the center. "Grief is just love with no place to go." "They asked me if I'd want to speak," Jaden said, "about Mom." My breath caught. "Do you want to?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I think I need to." And that's when I realized he wasn't just grieving anymore. He was ready to lead. The weeks leading up to the event were quiet but rich with preparation. Every evening, Jaden would sit at the table with his notepad, scratching out memories, crossing through drafts, staring into space. Once, I found him asleep on the couch, pen still in hand. He didn't ask for help, but he didn't shut me out either. It reminded me of Sarah when she was his age, fiercely independent, but soft in the middle when no one was looking. On the morning of the event, Eli came into my room wearing his church shoes and a button-down shirt that didn't quite fit his arms anymore. "Does this look okay?" he asked. "You look perfect," I said, straightening his collar. He grinned. "I'm going to say her name too." My eyes stung. She'd love that. The high school gym had been converted into a simple but beautiful gathering space, folding chairs in neat rows, a podium wrapped in ivy. Behind it, a banner. Remembrance Speaks. Angstberdation. People filtered in slowly, neighbors, teachers, strangers. Karen arrived with her husband. Will came in carrying a tray of cookies, already cracking a joke with the event organizer. Dana flew in from Maryland, wearing a soft blue scarf Sarah would have liked. And then it was Jaden's turn. He stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone with a calm I hadn't expected. "My name is Jaden Duvall," he said, his voice clear. "And I'm here to talk about my mom, Sarah. Every performance of grade 1. There was a silence that filled the room like reverence. She was funny, and smart, and strong in a way that didn't always look like strength. She made pancakes with chocolate chips on hard days and sang off-key in the car, and once helped me build a volcano for science class using only vinegar and some weird purple glitter she found in the basement. Laughter rippled gently through the crowd. But she was also tired, Jaden said, and afraid, and she didn't always know how to ask for help, because sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us the quietest. His voice caught there, but he didn't flinch. "My mom didn't get to finish her story," he said. "But she made sure the rest of us could finish ours. She left behind love and letters and warnings. She fought with everything she had, and now it's our job to speak her name out loud. So people like her aren't forgotten, and people like him don't get away with it." There was no applause when he stepped down, just a standing silence, the kind that says, "We heard you." Eli tugged my sleeve. "Can I say something now?" The organizer nodded, and Eli climbed the step stool to reach the microphone. "My mommy's name was Sarah," he said. "She used to make me giggle when I was sad. I miss her, but I know she's not gone. She's in my dreams and my drawings, and in the way Grandma hugs me real tight. In 24, with you make very 4, he held up a picture he'd drawn a big heart with our whole family inside it. The room broke. Tears, smiles, clasped hands, even the organizer dabbed her eyes. Afterward, people came up to us, one by one. A woman in her 70s said, "I wish I'd had your daughter's courage." A teenage girl whispered, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." A man with weathered hands just nodded, eyes wet. We didn't just speak Sarah's name that day. We restored her. To the world. To ourselves. On the drive home, Eli was quiet. Then he said, "Grandma, is it okay that I feel a little happy now?" I smiled through tears. "It's more than okay, sweetheart. It means she did her job. She made sure we could keep going." And in the quiet of that car, as the summer light slanted across the dashboard, I felt it. Sarah's love didn't vanish. It simply multiplied. It had been nearly a year since Sarah died when I met the woman who changed everything again. I was planting tulips in the front yard, Sarah's favorite kneeling in the dirt with a worn pair of gloves, and Eli playing nearby with his trucks. The spring air was crisp, and the sun stretched across the neighborhood in that golden way it only does after a hard winter. That's when I saw her. She stood on the other side of the fence, maybe late 30s, with tired eyes and a purse clutched tight to her chest. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just watched for a moment. I stood, brushing soil from my knees. "Can I help you?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Her voice was thin. "Are you Sarah Duvall's mother?" My heart paused. "Yes." She nodded once, eyes watering. "I'm sorry to bother you. I didn't know where else to go." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. It was the article from the trial, the one with Sarah's photo and the headline about Malcolm's conviction. "I followed the case," she said, her voice breaking. "I knew him too." She said her name was April. She'd met Malcolm at a trade expo a few years back. He was going by Mark Lee, then slick, charismatic, always offering to help others with financial wellness. They'd gone out a few times, but something felt off. "He always had rules," she whispered, "about what I ate, when I called, how long I could stay over. He never raised his voice, but I always felt smaller when he was around." A problems paused, panning. One night, she said, she woke up dizzy, her head pounding, after he'd made her tea. I thought it was stress. But then he got weird. He started hiding things, pushing me to quit my job, said we could live off his investments. I broke it off, and he didn't fight it. He just smiled, said I'd be back. She never was. But she always wondered if she'd imagined it all, until she saw Sarah's name. I invited her inside. We sat at Sarah's old dining table, the scent of lemon-scented wood polish still faint in the air. Eli drew in the living room, and April told me her story in full. The timeline fit. The behaviors matched. The controlling patterns. The subtle gaslighting. The tea. "It's like he had a script," she said. "He did," I told her. She didn't cry much. But when she did, it wasn't for herself. It was for Sarah. "I think he was working up to something," she said. "With me." But I left just in time. "You're gonna maybe in this." I squeezed her hand. "Then Sarah saved you, even from where she was." April stayed for dinner. Jaden came by later and listened, jaw tight, nodding slowly as she spoke. He didn't say much, but before she left, he offered her one of the sunflower pins we'd made for the Remembrance Project. She pinned it on her coat, touched it gently. "Thank you," she whispered. After she left, Jaden sat across from me, elbows on the table. "There's more of them, isn't there?" he said. "Maybe," I admitted. Maybe not many, but maybe enough. Then we can't stop. I nodded. We won't. By the end of the week, we launched the website Sarah Speaks. It was simple at first, a few blog posts, some of Sarah's videos, a warning signs checklist based on what she experienced, contact info for domestic violence hotlines, anonymous testimonials. Dana helped moderate, Karen advised on legal language. We didn't want it to be a place of sorrow. We wanted it to be a place of clarity. One woman sent in a message, "I thought I was just sensitive. Now I realize I was surviving." Another wrote, "I'm alive because of your daughter. Thank you." And another, "Can I speak her name too?" Yes, you can. One night, I sat at the desk and stared at Sarah's picture on the homepage. She didn't live to see this, but she'd made it possible. "Your voice is louder now, baby," I whispered, "and we're just getting started." "I've Revel," Eli patted in, sleepy-eyed, holding his stuffed bear. "Grandma," he mumbled. "Mom says good job." I blinked. "What?" He yawned. I heard her in my dream. Then he crawled into my lap, head against my chest, heartbeat steady as the roots beneath our home. And just like that, I felt her again. Everywhere. It wasn't the sound of justice that stayed with me. It was the sound of footsteps in an empty hallway, the hush of shoes on polished tile, the faint buzz of an overhead light that needed changing. The courthouse wasn't built for peace, it was built for decisions. And on that morning, I realized some decisions don't come from judges, they come from truth. Malcolm's appeal had been denied months ago. But there was still the matter of the Maryland investigation. Dana had pressed charges, the state had built a case. And now, after everything, he'd be transported back east to stand trial again. And they wanted us there. Dana asked me to go with her. I didn't hesitate. Will drove us. The three of us in his truck, quiet for long stretches, Dana watching the trees blur past her window while I clutched Sarah's photo like a talisman. "You okay?" Will asked during a stop at a gas station. I nodded. Just remembering, when we arrived at the courthouse, it was smaller than I'd expected. Modest. The kind of building you'd walk past 100 times and never think of the pain it holds inside. Dana's hands trembled as we walked in. I slipped my arm through hers. "You're not alone." Inside, everything was beige and humming, fluorescent lights, old vending machines, security guards with polite detachment. We waited in a room that smelled of coffee and disinfectant. When they brought Malcolm in, I didn't flinch. Neither did Dana. He looked smaller. Not in stature, but in presence. The arrogance had thinned. His hair was grayer. The smug smile was gone. For once, he wasn't in control of the room. Dana testified first. She spoke slowly, clearly, hands clasped in her lap. She told them about the way he watched her sleep. The subtle rules. The nights she'd wake up confused. The fear that settled over her like fog. "I almost didn't come forward," she said, "because I thought no one would believe me. But then I saw what happened to Sarah. And I realized if I stayed quiet, it would be like saying he still had the right to hurt people. I know Hev Grablins." She didn't cry, but I did. After her, I was asked to give a victim impact statement. I walked to the front, photo in hand, and looked straight at the judge. "My name is Ethel Duval," I said, "and the woman he hurt wasn't just Dana or Sarah. It was every woman who learned to question her own instincts, every mother who buried a daughter and wondered what she missed." I paused, holding up the photo. "This is my daughter. She was loved. She was strong. She was raising 2 boys and surviving a marriage built on lies. She died trying to get out. And I need this court to understand this man isn't a mistake. He's a method. And if you let him walk free again, you are telling the next woman that her life isn't worth believing in." The judge nodded solemnly. Malcolm didn't look at me. Coward. Back in the hallway, I finally let myself exhale. Dana hugged me tight. "You gave me the courage to say it out loud." "No," I whispered. "You found that all on your own. I just stood beside you." As we walked toward the exit, I heard a voice behind us. "Miss Duval?" I turned. A woman, maybe early 50s, holding a court badge. "I just wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "I lost someone too. Not like this, but similar. Watching you speak today gave me hope." I nodded, throat tight. "Say her name," I told her. "That's how they live again. We drove home in silence for a while. Then Dana asked, "Do you ever feel like the fight is never over?" I smiled, watching the trees pass again. "No," I said, "but I know now that we're not fighting alone." When we pulled into the driveway, Eli ran out to meet us. He clutched a folder in his hand. "I drew a new one," he shouted. It was a drawing of our whole family standing beneath a big tree, with Sarah as a bright sun in the sky. "You're getting good at these," Dana told him. He grinned. "That's because Mommy helps me. In my dreams." Will ruffled his hair. "I believe it," he said. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I stood at Sarah's old window and watched the stars. Some wounds don't scar the way we expect. Some bloom. The letter came in a plain envelope, no return address, just my name, written in a tight, careful script. At first, I thought it might be another thank you. Sarah Speaks had grown beyond anything I expected. We received letters from across the country now. Survivors, advocates, mothers. People who'd seen themselves in Sarah and found their way back to the light. But this letter was different. Inside was a short note, typed, unsigned. "You don't know me, but I knew your daughter. I didn't have the courage to speak when it mattered. I carry that shame every day. Please accept this gift not as an apology, but as a quiet act of respect." Folded inside was a cashier's check for $10,000. I sat down at the kitchen table, heart pounding. For a long time, I didn't move. The next morning, I called Karen. I read her the letter, told her about the money. "What do you think we should do with it?" I asked. Karen didn't hesitate. "Use it for her. Make something permanent." That's how the idea for the bench came about. A memorial, not a statue, not a tombstone, something living, something that invited people to sit, to remember, to feel safe. We partnered with the local park district. Sarah used to take the boys to Willow Creek Park every Saturday, always brought snacks, always wore her ridiculous floppy sun hat. Eli still remembered the ducks. A spot near the water felt right. Jaden helped design the plaque. We chose a sturdy wooden bench with black wrought iron arms. The engraving read, "In loving memory of Sarah Duvall. Let no voice go unheard." When it was installed, we invited just a few people. No press, no fanfare. Just us, Karen, Will, Dana, the boys. A few close friends. It was early fall. The leaves had just started turning, bright flares of amber and red falling around our feet like confetti. Eli brought sunflowers. He arranged them neatly on the bench and whispered, "Hi, Mommy." Jaden didn't say much. He just sat for a while, looking out at the pond, hands in his lap. Later, he pulled out a folded piece of paper and tucked it behind the plaque. Another letter, maybe. Another moment he wasn't ready to say out loud. That was okay. We all have our ways. Will stood beside me, hands in his pockets. She would have loved this. She hated benches that were too short, I said with a soft smile. Always said if you're going to rest, make it count. We laughed quietly. Dana leaned down, ran her fingers across the engraving. "She'd be proud of you," she said to me. I blinked back the tears. I just wanted the world to see her again. They do. I'm C. That night, back at home, I wrote in my journal, "Some people leave legacies in buildings, in books, in empires. My daughter left hers in letters, in love, and in the lives she saved after her own ended." The next week, I returned to the park alone. I brought a book, some tea, and sat on the bench for nearly an hour. Birds chirped overhead. A breeze rustled the trees. Across the path, a mother pushed a stroller, humming softly. And then something surprising happened. A woman sat down beside me. She looked nervous, like she was about to apologize for intruding. "Is this the Sarah Duvall bench?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She exhaled. "I've read about her. I come here sometimes, when I need courage." I looked at her hands. They trembled slightly. "You don't have to say anything," I said gently. But she did. She told me about her husband, about the fear, the control, the quiet bruises no one saw. And then she said, "I filed for separation yesterday, dearie." I didn't cry. I reached for her hand. "You're not alone," I said. She gripped it tightly. We sat there, in silence, as the wind moved around us. I didn't need to speak. The bench was doing the work. Sarah was still doing the work. A place to rest. A place to begin again. It came out of nowhere, the way children's questions often do. We were walking home from the grocery store, Eli's small hand in mine, swinging between us. The leaves were bright above our heads, and he had a lollipop in his mouth, his little sneakers scuffing the sidewalk. "Grandma," he said around the candy, "is Mommy in heaven?" I stopped. Not out of shock, but because I didn't want to answer on autopilot. The truth deserved better than that. I knelt down beside him. "What do you think?" I asked softly. He shrugged, thoughtful. "Jaden says she is, but sometimes I don't see her when I look up." I smiled. "That's because she's not just up there." He looked confused, so I placed his small hand over my heart. "She's here, baby. She's in the way we love, the way we laugh, the way we remember." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That makes more sense." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I sat on the porch with my journal, listening to the soft hum of autumn insects, and wrote, "There will always be questions I can't answer, but I can meet them with honesty, with softness. That's what Sarah would have done. That's how I'll raise them." We were close to the 1-year mark now. 1 year since Sarah's last breath. 1 year since the house went quiet. 1 year since I found that damn USB. I thought grief might dull by now, like a bruise fading under the skin. But it hadn't. It had simply reshaped itself, woven into the routines, the dinners, the school pickups, the way Jaden triple checks the locks at night, the way Eli traces his mother's name with his finger on the bench plaque. Karen called me the next morning. "There's an award," she said, her voice almost shy. "The state's putting together a ceremony for survivors and advocates. Sarah's name came up, and yours." My breath caught. "Why me?" "Because you didn't let her story end where it was supposed to. You gave it legs, voice, movement." I didn't know what to say. I just held the phone and let the quiet fill the space between us. A week later, we got the official invitation. The ceremony would be held at the state capitol. Dana agreed to speak. Karen was presenting. Jaden insisted on coming. "Mom would have hated the attention," he said, smirking, "but she would have gone anyway. For us." On the day of the ceremony, we dressed simply. Jaden wore a tie Sarah once bought him for a school dance. Eli wore her sunflower pin. I wore a navy blue dress and the necklace Sarah gave me the year I turned 60. Will drove us, like he always did. Quiet, steady, unshakable. When we arrived, I saw faces I recognized from newsletters and articles, other mothers, sisters, daughters, people who had built entire movements from loss. The energy in the room was heavy but charged, not mourning, something fiercer. Dana's speech was raw and brave. She spoke about what silence steals, about how justice is never loud enough. She said Sarah's name 3 times, each one like a bell ringing through the chamber. Then Karen stepped up to the podium, plaque in hand. "I've worked in law enforcement for 27 years, she began, "and I've seen too many names fade into paperwork, but not this time." She talked about Sarah's meticulous evidence, her courage, and then about me. Ethel Duvall didn't have a badge. She didn't have a courtroom. She had grief and questions and a stubborn refusal to accept the easy version of her daughter's death. I felt my throat tighten. She uncovered the truth, built a legacy, and made sure no other woman would have to walk through that dark alone. She called me forward. My knees trembled. Jaden squeezed my hand. Eli whispered, "You got this, Grandma." I walked to the front and accepted the award-engraved glass shaped like a flame. But I didn't speak. Not yet. I just held it up, let it catch the light, and whispered, "For you, baby girl." End quote. It is a end quote. That night, back at home, we ate spaghetti, the kind Sarah used to make, with too much garlic bread and loud music playing in the background. Jaden put on her favorite playlist. Eli danced barefoot across the kitchen tiles. And for a moment, just a breath of time, it felt like she was right there. Not gone. Just shifted. Like starlight. Still shining, long after the source is gone. The day began like any other quiet light pouring through the windows, Eli's footsteps padding across the hallway, the kettle hissing gently on the stove. But something felt different. Maybe it was the stillness in the air, or the way Jaden lingered at the kitchen table, staring at the photograph of Sarah on the mantel. Or maybe it was just the way grief wraps itself around anniversaries like ivy growing thick, quiet, persistent. 1 year. 12 months since the police knocked on my door. 12 months since I stood in her kitchen, trembling, holding that USB drive in my hand. 12 months since I discovered that everything I thought was ordinary was, in fact, a cover for something monstrous. The house had changed, not in structure, but in energy. What once felt haunted now felt held, like the walls themselves had heard our pain and softened to hold it. That morning, we drove back to Willow Creek Park. Jaden carried a folded blanket under his arm. Eli held a framed drawing one of Sarah with angel wings and a bright yellow halo standing in a garden of sunflowers. Will brought coffee and the little thermos Sarah used to take to work. And me? I brought nothing, because I already had everything I needed inside me. We laid the blanket near the bench. The air was crisp, with that clean scent that only comes after rain. A few squirrels darted across the grass, and ducks bobbed lazily on the pond. Jaden sat down, pulled out a notebook, and read from a letter he'd written. "Mom," he began, "it still hurts. I still want to call you when something stupid happens at school, or when Eli says something weird. I want to tell you about the essay I got an A on. I want to hear your voice. But even though I can't, I still feel you. I see you when I look in the mirror. I hear you in Grandma's laugh. And I know now, love doesn't leave. It just changes shape." He folded the letter, placed it in a small tin, and buried it beneath the bench, just under the roots of the tree that shaded us. Dana arrived a little later, bringing wildflowers and stories. She told us she was heading to Colorado to start a new job, a new chapter. But before she left, she promised to visit the bench every year, even if only in spirit. Karen and her husband came too. They brought homemade pie. "We figured Sarah wouldn't want this day to be all tears," she said. She was right. Eli handed out small sunflower pins we'd made the night before. He insisted on pinning one on everyone's shirt himself. When it was my turn, he looked up at me with those eyes, Sarah's eyes, and whispered, "Mom said to give this to you first." I didn't ask what he meant. I just knelt and let him press it into my sweater. We ate. We laughed. We remembered. As the sun dipped low, we stood in a circle and said her name aloud, each of us, once, softly, with love. "Sarah, Sarah, Sarah." It echoed, and then the quiet settled in again, not heavy, but full, like a heartbeat slowing, like the closing of a good book. That night, back at home, I went to her room. It wasn't a shrine anymore. It was just a space. Her books still on the shelf, her perfume faint on the dresser, the photo of her and the boys still framed beside the bed. I sat down, opened my journal, and wrote, "1 year ago, I lost my daughter and found the truth. 1 year ago, I was swallowed by grief and clawed my way back into the light. 1 year ago, I thought justice meant revenge. Now I know it means remembrance. Sarah Duvall was my daughter. She was brave. She was flawed. She was brilliant. She was loved. And today, her story doesn't end. It begins again. The final entry. Not because the pain is gone, but because the story has finally landed." Eli padded into the room. He didn't say anything. Just crawled into my lap, the way he always did when the world felt too big. We sat there together in the quiet, hearts beating in rhythm. Outside, wind rustled the trees. Somewhere, a dog barked. And inside, under the hush of old walls and soft lamplight, love stayed. Not loud, not perfect, but lasting. What remains is what matters. And Sarah? She remains. Everywhere. This story is a reminder that justice doesn't always roar. It often whispers through the quiet strength of those left behind. Through grief, betrayal, and loss, Ethel's journey teaches us that even in the face of deep injustice, truth can still rise, and love can still endure. It's not always the loudest voice that brings change, but the most persistent one. Sarah's legacy shows that one life, one voice, and one act of courage can echo far beyond the silence of a closed door.